Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I think it is episode 6 for 2020. Get it? And today, to help us get it, my guest, Simone Jo Moore, um, is going to explore I suppose, an interesting topic because I think there's just as many questions as there are maybe answers that she's got for us. But welcome, Simone, and I'm glad to have you back. Really enjoyed our chat last year.
And here we are again.
And here we are again.
We like our
Yet again.
conversations. Yet again. Yet again to get it.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if I always get it. But it's good to have the conversation.
It is
Um,
indeed.
and I think that's part of the topic is sort of to understand your own voice, isn't it? Um, so if you say, okay, say you're busy writing a bunch of articles, and those articles is going to, or blog posts, is going to turn into a book, which you normally do, um, and you don't want to commit to a date. That's a sign of a non-committed author, by the way.
I think it's a sign of being an accidental author.
What do you mean by becoming visible?
Oh, well, it's really interesting because some of my most recent writings or posts on LinkedIn have, or I guess the whole topic has been born out of so many different thoughts and ideas, feelings, experiences, wonderings, but also the wanderings through what we've experienced, not just in the last couple of years, but, you know, what makes us who we are and how do we express that?
Mm,
How do we, how does that come to a purpose that's going to make a difference in some way that not just for what we want to know for ourselves, but how do we have that as a voice, or how does it seen in the world when there is so much noise out there?
mhm.
And the other facet of becoming visible is like, oh, do I really want to express that? Do I really want to put that out there? So there's all those other things that come into play. So there's the positive side of wanting to do
Mm,
it, and then there's the fears and the reasoning behind it. And yeah, there's a whole host of reasons, but a lot of it too has come out of the bigger focus now that's happened through, mm, here's the words, like the great resignations and the diversity, equity, inclusivity side of things, making sure that the people that aren't normally seen are also included and seen in what they do. There's the people behind the scenes that, oh gosh, they make such a massive difference, yet they don't have a voice.
mm.
So I think becoming visible, there's a lot of different facets to this.
Yeah.
And for many of us, it started when we were very, very young,
Mm.
you know. There's,
Yeah.
I used to use books, and this is one of the reasons I love writing and reading so much. Gosh, I still don't use a digital book reader because I still just love the tactile, physical feel of a book. And if I happen to be traveling, which is starting to happen again, yay, but it just means that I don't have to turn it off. I can close and open that anytime
Yeah.
I like. I don't have to worry about recharging. It's there for whenever in fact, through reading, I find I recharge my
Yeah.
mind. And I think escaping into those books is really part of my nature and a really long held habit because of, say, maybe wanting to escape other things, wanting to be somewhere other than where I was. And even to the extent of where you want to sublimate yourself into the characters and those worlds. It gives you a chance to perhaps live or behave differently, explore what's possible. So it really brings up needs and wishes and saying, well, oh, wouldn't it be great if my real world was like that? And then you have to start wondering, well, how would you make your real world like that?
Mm. And it's not always possible. And difficult. So before we started talking, I mentioned you said that you're an introvert, and I laughed, but I didn't laugh because I didn't believe it. I laughed because I'm also an introvert, and when I tell people that, yeah, I'm an introvert, they say, no, you're not. Um, so doing what we do quite often, I don't want to use the word force, but means that we have to adopt a persona to be successful at what we do, because communication is such a big part of doing what we do. Yeah, if I started life as a techie, and I used to joke about myself, I was quite happy as long as you kept sliding pizzas underneath the door. Um, but doing what I do today, I can't be like that because I need to be visible. So how do you deal with this?
I
Um,
Yeah, that
the,
whole yeah,
having to be this public persona.
I think it's fascinating actually. I think that, the way people are incredibly interesting. I loved people watching. And of course, Francis, the cafes is one of the best places to do that anywhere in the world. Sit down in a cafe and just watch the world go by. And when I mean watching the world go by, you're really talking about watching the people go by, or seeing people at another table and imagining who they are, what they do, just by the way they present themselves. And often, because of in the majority of our courses and in the frameworks, we talk a lot about relationships, communication, understanding our customers, understanding our teams, understanding our leaders, and so on and so forth. Yet we often get the story wrong because our level of emotional intelligence is not necessarily as high as one might hope. Our level, the way we describe things, language can be a savior, or it can also be a limiter, because we haven't expanded our emotional vocabulary enough, or we haven't read wide enough to see different contexts, or we haven't um, read enough on a wide genre rather than being in one area to give us a wider imagination, if you like. So, all those things that we have pre-programmed as part of our experiences um, are being brought to bear on understanding who someone is, or what a person, who is this person? What might they
Yeah.
see? And as you've said, most people will be, quite shocked if they say, "Well, no way, I've seen you talk, or I've seen you present, or, you know, uh, there's no way you could possibly be an introvert." And it's interesting how they automatically equate that with being shy, when it's not necessarily about being shy. It's just a different way that we process information and a different way that we recharge. We all have a wear and tear, rest and repair cycle, right?
Mm.
And I think imagining is actually part of my strength, having that wide imagination and the deeper contexts, but it can also be a weakness in different ways. I can imagine different outcomes to the real and the unreal situations that I thought possible. But it's only with each level of actual experience that we can start adapting to those, whether they're our nightmares or our dreams. Whatever we imagined, it's only through having the experience that we learn whatever the lesson is. And that persona is still part of who you are, because your body, your brain can't hide your true self. Your nervous system is going to show your true self through other ways. People will know if you're not being authentic, whether it's through the sound of your voice, the facial expressions that you have. There's a whole story going on that if you understand it, you can feel if it's not an authentic part of who the person is. So even if the person at that time on the stage giving the conference, having the deep conversation with the client and exploring whatever the topic happens to be, they're really techniques, they're approaches. So when I go up on stage, even before any webinar, I like to pre-prepare. I like to, not in terms of having the script necessarily, just where's my focus? What are the key points that we're hoping to explore? Because, you can go off on all sorts of rabbit holes and tangents, can't you? As we often do sometimes if it's an after conference and sitting down with a glass or two. But these are techniques and approaches. So, for example, I did a lot of voice coaching, a lot of acting and performance coaching for myself, and as well as helping others now with that. And there was one thing I will never, ever forget it. A really close friend and colleague said to me many years ago, if you stop being nervous when you go up on the stage, then you've stopped caring about what you're going to tell. And I think that's an interesting thing. So we're talking about having a voice. What's, you becoming visible, the topic becoming visible, the purpose, the message becoming visible. Yeah.
I don't quite know if I agree with that statement, though.
I think I'm still nervous for other reasons, not just for that. I get nervous because people will judge you. It's an automatic thing. There is always going to be a bias, and that sort of thing. But I think when you have such a passion and a care and concern that you think that, you believe, it's not just what you think, but you feel that this message has enough gravitas or has enough impact that it's going to make a difference to someone, then that's something that can build, we can switch some of the fear into a nervous energy that actually is a momentum, a forward movement.
Okay. So the topic is becoming visible. And automatically I would ask the question, so should we always be visible? Why do we want to become visible? Is it necessary to be visible?
I think it depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve at that particular time. Definitely, some people do not want to be known. There are a lot of people that prefer to stay in the shadows. Remembering too that, the impacts that those people have were not always initially positive sometimes, but became so because of any learning and resilience they help others build. Or in themselves. We have, family that maybe we are protecting them because we don't want to be visible because it protects them. Or it could be friends or colleagues. It could be out of confidence, a lack of support. It could be, it's not so much wanting the limelight, if that makes sense. It's not about
prejudice also, perhaps?
Yes, there is definitely that occurs as well, because there's always going to be a bias there. I think becoming visible is a real dichotomy. It's a real double-edged sword in a lot of
Mm.
ways. If you were to name someone right now that was a great mentor for you, in that first 10 seconds of coming up with that name of who you want to thank, there's also that, oh, do I put the name out there or not? Because how much does this, is this, it's a moment of gratefulness, but it's also too, where does this person stand within all of that?
Yeah, in terms of this public space that we've sort of forced into. I mean,
Yeah.
I resisted for a very, very long time to actually engage actively on social media. And now my wife is annoyed with me because I can't, bloody well leave it alone.
Have you become addicted?
I must admit I have, yeah. Yeah, rabbit holes, man alive. But yeah, there's some good in it also. I suppose it does give you a voice. The problem with social media is you never know if that voice is heard.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there. There definitely is a lot of noise that can cover it up. And the interesting facet is that you can build and this is a very practical thing to do, you can build your competency and knowledge and experience by being part of those, groups around the issues, the topics that, you're most passionate about. But remembering that by being in the like-minded areas, that you're also insulated from new information or from other
Mm,
areas that can shift those perspectives or shift the context in what you're passionate about, and looking at maybe is there more out there. I think this is the other thing too. I've always had an unending curiosity about stuff, so I think that's always helped me sort of move out into those other boundary areas, or push the boundaries, or
mm,
try and crack them open, and get rid of them totally. So I think, start where you learn enough about what it is that you're really passionate about, but you constantly got to keep verifying it.
mm,
Is it the truth? And well, is it a fact versus truth? And that's a whole other story in conversation, isn't
mm,
it? Fact versus truth. But does it make sense in the context to which I understand it? Does it make sense in all contexts? Maybe not. But that's
yeah,
where I think that don't do yourself a disfavor. Don't stay within a bubble of one group. Make sure that you're putting your tendrils out into other areas, even if it's being a stalker, if you like, in terms of silence is golden, as they say. But my eyes still see. So
mm,
even if you're silently allowing the content to percolate, and then when you see something, you think, you know what, I think I'm understanding this a little bit better now. Let
mm,
me be brave enough to ask a question, and say, hey, I've been in here for a while. I've been reading a bit. I'm not sure about this particular thing. Would someone like to explain that for me?
yeah. But I
And
think
I
that's one of the blessings of being an introvert is that you naturally have the ability to go and stand against the wall in a party and observe and
mm,
listen and truly hear and see. I'm not always convinced that I learned something out of it. One of my favorite quotes is from, I always thought it was a Delphian maxim, but it's not. It was Euripides that said, question everything. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Being It's interesting. Not being seen was a lesson I learned very young. We've heard the old saying, "Children should be seen, not heard," and that is so archaic. that really is an Edwardian style or Victorian Edwardian style saying. Even as antiquated as it is, I don't think the practice has completely stopped, so to speak. And there's been some pretty hard lessons. And so when I was told, okay, if you really want to know what's going on, just go behind the closed door and listen in. And that was how you discovered what was kind of really happening in the dynamics of the family, etc. And the interesting thing is that even though that's some of the ways that you discover things, you don't truly understand everything that you're hearing unless you're going to be part of the conversation eventually.
So that's one of the advantages of becoming visible. Is to start engaging and make meaning of all of these things that you.
Exactly. You need to start connecting. You have to start participating. There are times too where I'm still frightened of silence. They usually say for anybody that's DJing and everything, silence is a DJ's nightmare, or any radio presenter, anytime that there's dead air, it's a scary moment, because what do you fill it with? And I think one of the other ways that we are sometimes visible when we don't want to be is you overtalk, or you just start sprouting whatever just comes out of your brain, because the silence itself means that you have to listen, or that you have to, or you use
process.
it as a barrier, or process, or you use it as a barrier because you don't know something. So sometimes people get frightened. Oh, I don't know how to contribute to this, or I don't know what to say. So you end up filling the silence with guff. I don't know how else to describe it. But that's because you don't want to provide the opportunity for the other person to discover that you don't know, or that you or to judge, or to so sometimes you use it as a shield, which I also think is something I see happen a lot when people, it's a way of staying invisible, even though you're using your voice.
So do you find it's easier to I won't say disengage, but to step back as you get older?
I think
the reason
so.
I'm asking is because that's my experience.
Yeah.
I think, and also maybe this issue of you don't care so much what other people think of you.
I think there is that facet of, look, time's running out. Really? Do I really want to go through this right now? No. Do I have to put up with this any longer? No. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually teach that in our young leaders now? Or teach that with all our employees.
You know what I mean?
Now?
Quite often that's seen as being socially inept and being rude. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, in my culture at least, we talk about grumpy old men. Yeah. So I'm a grumpy old man now. So I don't put up with all the crap anymore.
I don't know. It could be, instead of grumpy old men, it could be a great resonance of mindfulness.
I think that's what it is, but that's not necessarily how it's perceived.
I just like to try and change, these acronyms, give it a flip. I think when we're silent and waiting, there's something inside us that has the opportunity to grow, that there's a creativity that can be built by letting our minds swirl around something. But also too, whether it's the over talking or it's the silence, in a lot of ways it's to prevent ourselves from being hurt. I think this is where people's understanding, there's something where a parent can be like, silent but angry. My mother was so good at that, the very quiet voice, and slower and softer, and that's when you knew you were really, really in trouble. Or the harsh scolding on the other side of things. But I think there's a balance that we're trying to seek in terms of how visible we are at certain things. It was also too, I mean, years and years ago, I mean, I must be talking 20 odd plus years ago, at one job I was managing. And I decided, okay, let me be more of who I am. So I started, bringing in my wonderful, sculptured cups to drink out of and things like that. And they all started thinking I was, too much of a hippie or a bit weird and this sort of thing. And it actually changed the way they were behaving towards me because I wasn't wearing a suit anymore. And I thought, wow, a change of costume changed the behavior, and I am talking, but look what's happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't have to be in a suit for you to take advantage and respect and use what's in here and what's in here.
Yeah, but it still makes a difference. If I go and see or with my first engagement with a new customer, I still wear a suit. I don't wear a tie, so that's my little bit of rebel in it. But people
or some people
do
wear the
behave
ties,
differently.
but wear incredibly wonderful ties as an expression.
Yeah, you see, I find that a little bit silly to have going to a serious meeting with a Daffy Duck tie. Then I'll rather go in my t-shirt and my jeans, so which I, by the way, feel comfortable in.
I think that's part of this whole thing. There's this gap between feeling that shift and actioning that shift of becoming visible. That point where we can be entering that inertia or be frozen. And I think part of the issue is that if we find ourselves frozen, we end up in this looping spiral that it's actually not a stasis mode. You end up degrading yourself. You end up actually, eating away at yourself in different ways. So I think, we don't want to end up in oblivion. There's this utopia and there's this dystopia. We don't want to end up in oblivion. So one of the things that one of my favorite authors has used this term, and I love it, is through-topia. And I've spoken
Who's
about
the author,
that.
by the way?
That would be Manda Scott.
Okay.
And just in the terms of using that term is really interesting because it's actually about when you're writing or when you're having a conversation, building that environment where people can actually journey their way through something.
Okay.
So it's about coming into being able to shift. It is about taking that step forward. It is about taking that action, which is why if people go through my LinkedIn posts about becoming visible, they'll see that my book storyline is building as I'm thinking through this stuff and as I'm posting this stuff. So I'm taking my own journey through even writing this. So in a way, it's kind of journaling. So, one of the other topics is, emerging from the dark. And the interesting thing about that, I mean, it's natural for us to change. It's natural for us to engage with our imagination. But it's that moment when we unleash our imagination that the change becomes real. And that's that. Sometimes that change is done to us. Sometimes we're forced into emerging. Sometimes we do it to ourselves. But either way, it's a collaborative mindset. We are either collaborating with heart and mind together, so we're actually using our whole self to do this, or we might be collaborating with others, the ones that are supporting us, or even the ones that have been pushing us. Sometimes what starts in innocence, you might find yourself a willing participant in some deep-seated response that you weren't expecting yourself to have to a conversation or a topic. Sometimes I think, it seemed to be fate to live in that dark space, and living in the shadows was something I'd really become accustomed to. But it's really interesting because when you're taught to be quiet, from such a young age, when you're taught that, why would you say that? Or, you'd come out with a question and the response would be, don't be stupid. It took me a long time to learn that the response like that from people was because they were frightened in and of themselves because they didn't have an answer to give you.
Yeah,
And yeah, so
absolutely.
so truth really only emerges when you actually expose it to light. It's only when you start exploring in the shadows sometimes that you find that flicker or that gamut of being within you that says, this is enough. Sometimes it only takes a glimmer of light for something or from someone so that you start to see the shadow and realize, well, hang on, the shadow is over there. I'm actually the one in the light casting that shadow. So that's the interesting aspect, I think, when we talk about emerging from the dark or becoming more visible. It's almost Python-esque. I'm waiting for, the Monty Python quips to come through.
I think this is a little bit too serious to be frivolous about, because it's actually about us. Yeah, it's about it's not about becoming visible. It's about really being you.
Yeah.
But being so in a meaningful way that makes a difference to society and those around you.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's really part of how you make a difference. This isn't just about in your personal life. This is also in your professional life. How you show up is a really important aspect. One of my favorites to follow is Dr. Suzanne David. You should know her. She's South African, actually. And she has a wonderful book called Emotional Agility, but she's got 4 core concepts within and beyond. It really is such an active way she talks about it. And I love this whole thing. You have to be present. You actually have to show up. And I think that moment in emerging from the dark is when you see that glimmer of light. You're looking at this glimmer of light, but this glimmer of light is actually at you. And when you see that shadow and realize, oh, hang on, I'm actually in the light, then you can start seeing your way, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm being too metaphorical, but it to me, that's part of it. It's taking that next step and trying to find those mentors that make a difference in doing that.
yeah,
The essence of who we are, our empathy, our values, our emotions. These are things that we use to make decisions every day. It's part of our decision making that our brain uses, with our nervous system. So not to engage those, to shut those things down when we turn up at work, actually means we'll become poor decision makers.
Yeah, or doing things because we expect society wants us to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's this difficulty. It's actually a dichotomy, because we need to become visible to make a difference, but we also need to learn when not to be visible. Look, because circumstances may dictate that we just cannot make a difference. Yeah, what's the old saying? There's nobody as deaf as the person who doesn't want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this becomes a point about where do we choose to put our energy. You and I have talked before about this, that, and I'm just generalizing here, but, we know that introverts and extroverts gain their energy from different places, and that, and in different ways. And so I think that where are you going to focus your energy is really important, how you garner your energy and how you focus your energy. So if we are at the point, and I've often taught this in the communications for even service desks and call centers, there's a point where, hearing is a physical faculty, and we have people may have problems with their hearing, maybe not. But there's also that listening is a choice. So if we don't like a sound, our brain starts to shut down, whether it's the sound of, a car screeching or a bang, or, that's like we clamp up straight away. Our brain starts to clamp up and shut that down. And what happens is it only allows enough to deal with whatever, to recognize and deal with the chaos. But in terms of topic, maybe if someone doesn't like the topic you're talking about, or they don't like the sound of your voice, they immediately shut down. They're like, you know what, I'm going to turn it off or change channels and walk away somehow. And I think this is where understanding that empathy is a competence, not just a skill, and why we talk a lot about empathy and empathic leadership, because empathy has texture, it has color, it has depth. When I think about empathy, I think about emotional pathway. It's, empathy is exactly that. It's an emotional pathway from pity to compassion. I've often said where empathy shows is where value flows. And I think that building our emotional agility helps us personally and professionally.
Okay. So let's turn the conversation slightly. I think if there's one thing that COVID did, is it forced people to become visible in ways that they didn't want to be visible, because that's the only path there was. My social persona is not my space of comfort. It is now, because
you've had to practice at it.
It's a learned skill. It's
you have to experience it to bring that on board.
But it was comfortable. It was bloody uncomfortable. To sort of put yourself out there and not be able to I love physical communication, because I look at people's bodies, at their faces, all those little cues, and especially if I'm a little bit unsure about what I'm busy doing, which is often because I volunteer to do things that I find interesting, which means that quite often actually I don't know. I'm there as a fellow explorer, but with this one-way communication that the last 2-3 years that we were forced to engage with is not easy. So
no, and we've always said, email is the worst form of communication. That's broadcasting. It's not even communication. So yes, there might be a rolling conversation, but it's so slow in many cases. And the written word, it can be interpreted so differently to the way someone says it. And we know this. So I guess having voice chat, even if there's no video, at least you have some component of that instantaneous feedback and going, "Ooh, did I hear that right? Is that how you actually meant that?" Or, we've got that ability to correct and verify, paraphrase, the most underrated listening skill ever. But I think the other thing that has been really interesting, so for example, when I have training groups or run the workshops, now pre all the travel being locked down, etc., and being forced into a more virtual world, and I've always worked virtually. I've worked virtually for years, but I loved all the travel. I like you. I do like to actually be connecting physically with the people around me. But I've actually come to learn that it's still a physical experience to some degree when we have the video as well. So in my pre-workshop packs I send out, and I say, okay, well, might use Zoom, we do Mural and this, that, and the other, please, I always do a video and audio check. That's
Okay.
one of the things that I've often, I always do that with all the people that are attending, because if we were at a hotel event or if we were in a classroom, we would be physically seeing each other.
Yeah.
And we would be having that engagement on that basis, that I can see your face, I can see your expressions. Okay, it's not your whole body, but
Yeah.
at least I've got that amount of you. That adds to my ability to engage and communicate. So that, again, that becoming visible rather than just being a black square with a name, which sometimes people just have their phone number, not a name, or so I've worked very hard with the guys I work with to say, well, there's reasons why you might want to put your camera off. We are inside people's homes and we have to
Yes.
respect
Yeah.
that. So often we've said, if it's possible to find a space for you and you're comfortable putting the video on, that would be great, because you know what? If we were in a classroom, we would be face to face. So it would be great if we can do the same thing here. And I think that's really important, to engage with people on that basis. And the only other reason I say, look, if you've got children running behind you, and of course, and I never record my sessions, as far as I'm concerned, they're learning environments. I want people to feel, that they're psychological safe in that sense as well. So they've got their physical safety, their mental safety, and their emotional safety is taken care of. Those things I think is still really critical. I think some people have become more comfortable with the environment that they show behind them, or they've got those opportunities of blurring and
It's terrible. I hate that.
yeah, I don't mind the blur, but
All the time.
but people can have fun with it. They can, put up the photo from the weekend, or whatever is good for them. I'm really happy with that. But I think that being visible, and just by simply doing an audio and a visual check, coming back from each break, at the beginning and each break, I think makes a difference, because you're reconnecting each time.
Okay, that's a really good tip, and I'm going to also start using that. Yeah, so you do that every time a conversation stopped, and it restarts.
Every time. Hey, let's do a quick audio visual check. Make sure everything's cool.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So, what about this issue of being visible, but not knowing if you're seen? Social media.
In what way?
Because a like doesn't mean that you're seen.
No, I like sometimes there are bots that auto like. So there are some companies that, because they want to, they want to engage with you, or they want you to think that they have read your stuff. We know that there are bots that are set out there to do auto likes and things like that. Or some of them are set up to do things like auto reshare.
I don't mind if they do that.
I don't mind a reshare. That's great. But, sometimes, and I have to think about my own behavior in this as well, because I know that, I've had to learn a lot of the new apps just like everyone else has. And as the new apps come out and as they develop, and you're also choosing between apps. So, as an example, WhatsApp versus Signal, just as one example, it's like, well, which one do I use, or why do I choose to use that? Which way do I want to become visible? And it's interesting because I work across a lot of different industries and clients, I found I've had to have all of those apps.
Yeah.
Because some clients use this one and some clients use that one. And it's this liking. If someone likes something you've said, okay, so it shows up as a reaction. But what do you actually think about it? that's what I want to see. And I have to sort of think about, well, what's my own behavior? And I think, no, I like that. Or I love the clapping hands one, saying, yes, I like that. Well done. So it gives an extra added piece of emotion. Or let me think about it, the curiosity one. And so I like the fact that you can show different emotions in that way, but just a like without actually telling them what you really think. I've started a lot more, at least if I'm going to like something, do I
Comment.
want enough to reshare it? Do I feel important, to reshare it? Or am I happy, what kind of comment? What do I really think? Even if it's just half a dozen words, I think it's really important. If you've seen something, if you've read through it, you've already expended energy.
Okay.
Why
So,
did you expend energy on it?
yeah. So,
There must have been something you were thinking or feeling about it. So even half a dozen words, participate. That's that active
yes,
step.
yeah.
Participate.
So, I mean, this sort of means that if we want to be a good audience, we must also learn the behavior of a good audience,
Yes.
and not just let things happen in the background, because there's people putting themselves out there, sharing things because they genuinely believe that it will make a difference.
Yeah.
Hell, just have the courtesy, as you say, to engage. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, and it's hard for people because, there's so much going on. We've talked about how much noise is out there.
Well,
And that noise can drown you as well. And I think this is part of it. Again, we're only given so many breaths in this life. So
you must learn
when
to shallow breathe, then you've got more.
definitely deep breathe, make the most of the breaths that you have, right? So I think I think that's the point, make the most of those breaths that you have. I go back to my Polynesian healing systems work, the Hatha breath, in the Hawaiian culture, there's a lot of levels to that. We might say aloha, and that's hello and goodbye, and people sort of like the sound of it. But at the core of it, we're talking about the ha, the breath, and that if you have taken the time to post something, this is why I'm not really, maybe sometimes why I don't post as much on Twitter anymore and things like that. That I want my posts to have a little bit more to them now, because I'm still expending energy. And it has to have a little bit more, I guess, meaning to it. And the same with having this conversation. I'm expending my breath. That is my gift to you, because I can never get that breath back. And do I have the same respect then for you, because you're we're participating in this conversation together, that you're expending your energy and your breath having this conversation with me. So my need to respect your gift, that's a breath that you don't get back.
And also your need to be validated. And I don't think it's bad to be validated. We need validation. How else will we know whether we're busy going on a tangent?
I think that's an important part when we talk about validation. It's not just about validation. Yes, validation, you exist. Absolutely. I think that's important, acknowledging. And I think that's part of what the likes kind of do. That's sort of an acknowledgement, but I really feel it's done in such a flippant way sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, validation, but it's not just validation, you exist, which I think is still an important part of what they need. That people need to feel that they've been seen. And that's why I look at other cultures and think, wow, I love the wording that's being used, because the meaning behind them is, I see you. I acknowledge that you are there. And it's the same even in French when we say bonjour. it's actually not just, oh, bonjour. No, it's there to say, yes, you're here. I understand that you're there. I think this validation is not just about the person, though. It is a validation about the thoughts. It's a validation about the content, a validation about, yeah, I think this is good stuff. And thank you. I needed to hear. I've seen people, even when they say thank you, I needed to hear that today.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know, we've all got scars and marks of experience. You know, there's another post I recently put up is that, you know, resilient people don't walk between the raindrops. You know, we've all got scars to show for our experience, and we want to gain something from your lessons as I want to gain something from yours. And I think we don't always see other people's scars, but I think that journey in becoming visible is about, was our voice actually heard? And does my wisdom make a difference? Do those scars make a difference? Because it's those scars that have provided the lessons and the learning.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting thing. If we do become visible, how important is it to actually show your scars?
It's in the vulnerability question has been brought up in a lot of different discussions over the last year, especially. But
I just didn't want to use that word.
Oh, but that word is out there. You know, vulnerable leadership, empathic leadership, or empathetic leadership. You know, I think it's really quite different. You know, when you think about empathic, you know, does that mean, oh my God, they're in my mind, they can read my mind? You know, sometimes I wish they would read my mind, and there's other times where it's like, ooh, I don't think they want to know what I was just thinking just then. I think humor is definitely one of our great tools for dealing with a lot of this. Vulnerable. Wow. We can't expect other people to be vulnerable with us if we don't allow ourselves to do that either. I think there's a space, you know, there's a deep well of strength that we can draw on in our supporting structures that can help propel us forward. You know, I'm over the years, I've built myself a really deep nexus of connection, I think, that would astonish some people. And whether that, you know, personal and professional. And a lot of the time, the personal has become, sometimes the professionals become the personal, you know, in terms of that nexus of support. It takes courage to be that. It takes courage to make that first step and say, well, you know, this is me. Here I am. No, I don't know the answer to that. I think this is why I love those core skills of, you know, being a professional communicator and being a professional problem solver. And what I mean by a professional problem solver is, look, I might not have the answer, but I sure as heck know how I'm going to go about doing it.
Yeah, and that's important. That's most probably one of the best life skills that you can have in any job is to be able to solve problems.
Communication and problem solving, I think, for all the different techniques and approaches, which you need to find what works, you know, works best with you. But I think there's a wonderful sense of happiness when you finally be, you know, that human being. You know, it's not about wanting to be too little or being too much. It's really just wanting to stand in that space where you know that you're enough.
Yeah, but that's a very, very difficult thing to know, and I know very few people who actually truly believe that they're enough. I don't know if I believe that.
I think it's not so much, it might be enough in that moment. I think we're always looking to do more. We're always looking to be more. And that's part of reaching, isn't it? That's part of achieving and excelling. And we want to feel that we're achieving, absolutely. I think allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough for someone else to see our scars certainly doesn't guarantee that we are accepted by that person. There are no guarantees with this. Absolutely not. But we must remember that it's a very considered decision for you to reveal yourself. We do know that because there's high impact and potentially it can be devastating to yourself. But I think the lesson in that is not so much needing this other person's acceptance, like moving past that point where I really don't need your acceptance, but I need to start accepting myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that balance point is, of that momentary, no, I'm enough. I can reveal this to you, but well, hey, that's not good enough for you, then there's something on your side. Yeah, there's something on your side that's not gelling. But I need to accept who I am in that moment. And I think that was the lesson for a lot of the lessons for me, and I still get taught this numerous times. It's not about being accepted by others a lot. It's about the first step is about accepting who I am and what that means in the context of that particular time. Because I know I've reprogrammed myself zillions of times over the years.
But even knowing yourself, that's a Delphian maxim. Know thyself. Yeah.
Know thyself. I was just thinking about that. That's when they say, "Doctor, heal thyself."
Yeah. So it's one of those places that I still need to go. I still need to go and stand amongst the ruins of the temple of Apollo.
It's pretty amazing. You're talking about over in Greece.
Yeah.
The actual temple itself. Yes, I've been there. Stood at Delphi and all the rest, and thinking back and thinking, you know what? There is so much wisdom from centuries ago, millennium ago, that we still struggle with today. But there's so much wisdom that we find ourselves repeating. And I think for part of that, that's where I think this is why the experience thing, we can know something, but I don't think we understand something until we've actually experienced it.
Yeah, my dad was a history teacher, and he used to say the only thing that we learn from history is nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit blunt, but just looking at what's busy happening in the world again. Oh man, that's history being repeated.
There are some things that are happening now that people, some of the conversations have been, it's 2022 with all the advancements that have been made, all the technology, and yet these other things are occurring that just seem surreal, but they're not surreal. It's actually happening, but the mind, there's this is us trying to marry up and try and make sense of what's happening, and it doesn't always make sense. But we're constantly struggling trying to do that. I think that's one of the reason why I focus so much on what I call humanizing IT. Where's the ethics in our technology? Where's we talk about human tech. Well, human first, tech second. Humans can drive the tech, and the tech can drive the human, but without the context and looking at that from that space. And I think in order to do that, the visibility aspect, that becoming visible and making those voices heard, is so critical.
So, last little question, because we're coming up for an hour.
Mm.
Is it about becoming visible, or is it about a willingness to share the whole you for the benefit of the audience? Because all that I'm afraid of is if we talk about visible, then people just think about seeing. Yeah, and they're seeing and they're seeing. Yeah, and I'll rather be seen than be seen.
I see you.
Yeah, but do you really see me? Yeah, and that's the question. Yeah.
I think, as you know, right back to the beginning, you were talking about personas, and we do build our personas. There's parts of our characters that we put more forward than others. And again, I would come back to context. And I think that we're never going to be, we don't have that level of intimacy with everyone where you do truly know the background stories all the time, etc., and so on. But I think this is where, if you are truly interested, that you will ask the question and saying, will you share that story? You know, I've asked you sometimes where you've told me things off air and stuff, and I've gone, you know what, I think that's a really nice story. I think that's a story that people will relate to. It's something that they understand. I think stories have to go along with that being seen.
But really hearing somebody and seeing somebody actually takes an investment from you as the hearer and the seer also.
Well, that's that participation we talked about earlier. You know, if you've chosen to watch a particular webinar or be at a particular conference, or even as simple as sitting down at a bar and chatting to someone that just happens to be sitting there, or meeting someone new for the first time, if you've already taken that first step to ask that question, then again, I think it comes back to honoring that moment and having the ethics and having the compassion, having the kindness, having the courtesy and the humanity to listen to them, what's being said. And I think that you will often find that if that's the case, people will tell you more and reveal more about themselves than maybe you expected. Which can lead to different tangents and other things that you will probably find that you have in common, or even the arguments. It's not always about having the positive experiences either.
Yeah.
You know, if the world would be really boring if it's everyone happy clappy. That doesn't work. That doesn't exist. And so I think part of it is those conversations that we have that we go, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And surprises happen in different levels of want. But
it does.
Those surprises are what will often push those boundaries for ourselves as well.
Yeah. Well, Simone, I appreciate you. So I hear you and I see you. But most of all, thank you for caring. We're going to end the podcast now, so just stay online for a while, because we want to share. I want to share my contact detail and also Simone's contact detail. And Simone, if you hang around, so we can just do a quite quick wrap up after
we will indeed.
we
And may I
went
also
offline.
return that, because your Get It podcasts have been amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for going to listen also, because I know a lot of you do that afterwards. In fact, the vast majority of you do that afterwards. And if you would like to contact or make contact with Simone and chat about humanizing IT and becoming visible and allowing other people to become visible, you can book a 30-minute discovery session with her on her website, I assume. So please do so. And then from my side, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring us with your presence, because you being here is also an investment that you made in the topic that we talked about. I'm going to be a little bit more blunt and blatant. There's my contact detail. I spend a lot of my life at the moment around digital transformation and innovation. You'll see a new book coming out most probably at the end of this month or maybe halfway through next month. So look out for it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at our next session, which will be with Rob England and Sherry.